Thank you for being here. My name is Ana Carcedo, and I'm going to be talking about soybeans. I'm new here in North Dakota, and there is a lot of things and a lot of learnings I've been doing. So the format of this presentation is actually based in this publication, and you can find it later in the share folder. And if you want it, you can also send me an email, and I will make sure that you get it. So the format is kind of like this. I'm going to be saying some statements, and then I'm going to be saying if it is an actual thing that happens and is backed by science, or it's actually a misconception of the production. So saying this, I'm going to be going through the growing stages of soybean and then making some stops and saying these comments. So why growing stages are something important? It's basically because of two things. First, it helps you communicate. So if your agronomist say, oh, it's your soybeans in B3 or B4 or R1, it helps you to understand what are you saying. And then the other thing, it really helps you to understand the crop. It helps you to understand what is happening in the physiology of your crop. It helps you to understand why things happen and why things are important. So saying this, I'm going to go really fast in this because I know that you already have all this information, is how do we actually evaluate in which growing stage our soybeans are. So first, we should go and select 5 places in our field that we consider that they're representative. And then in each one of these different areas, you have to choose 10 consecutive plants and evaluate in which growing stage they are. So what we are going to see is that probably they are going to be between 2 different stages, and what you have to consider is that you have to have more than 50% of the plants in one stage to be considered in that stage. So saying that, and this is just to be everybody in the same page, we're going to start with BE. So BE is actually the emergence. Is when you start seeing the cotyledons, but they are not completely expanded. So the first statement is soybean plants needs to have uniform emergence and uniform spacing. So that's something that you evaluate in the emergence of the crop. Actually, this is not true. If we think in soybeans, we actually have to acknowledge that they are so plastic. So they have this resource that other plants do not have, that is branching. So they can have a lot of branches, or they can be pretty much one only stem. So depending your conditions and the growing environment that these plants have and the plant population, you will have completely different structures in your soybean. So that kind of compensates the different spaces that you might have. So this is actually related to something that's really important, and is the interception of radiation. So radiation is the energy that comes from the sun, and actually it's the energy that the plants uses to generate all the yield. So if you have a situation like we see in the figure A with a really low plant population, what we're seeing is a lot of space where you can see the soil. And that means it's a space where your plant is not capturing all this radiation. So you are losing yield just because you are not capturing all that energy. So when we're talking about plant population, something that's really important to acknowledge is that this really varies. So if you go through all United States, you're going to see that these different environments actually requires different plant populations. And saying that, there is a lot of things that they're actually interacting here. And it demands that we have more or less plants to attain these different yields. So other thing that we should consider is which maturity group. So this information is actually from North Dakota. It was a field trial that it was composed by 9 different experiments that was done in 4 years in Carrington, Prosper, and Fargo in different water conditions. And what they found out is, it's really interesting, is that basically they tried different maturity groups. We have late maturity groups going from 0.6 to 0.8, and early maturity groups going from 0 to 0.2. And then they combine this across different row spacings. And what we can see here quite clearly is that if we have the late maturity groups and we combine it with this short row spacing, we have a yield improvement. Again, I'm showing this just because of what we were talking. It's like this is all about this distribution of plants and how these plants actually capture radiation. So if we see the differences in the pictures here that they are actually showing this difference in maturity groups and row spaces, we can clearly see here that we have a space that we are not covering. And all this space is actually yield that we are losing. So when we're talking about that, it's something that we should consider is also the praxis, right? It's all about an economical decision at the end. So what we have here is, it was one experiment where they planned different seeding rates and they got yield, right? This will behave as you can imagine. It will keep improving until a point that the yield will saturate, and if you keep putting more plants, you're just wasting money because you're putting more seeds, but you're not getting more yield. And what they did is basically saying, okay, let's make some economical scenarios. So we have, so with the same yield data, we have a market price of $8 per bushel versus a market price of $10 per bushel. And they say, okay, let's think in different prices of seeds, right? And then we have the three colors here in the lines that represents different costs of seeds. What we can see here is that if we compare in the, let's say the best case scenario, the one we have the best price for our seeds and the lower cost, this green line, is that it doesn't matter. You can keep putting more seeds in your ground and you're going to keep increasing your revenue. But if we go to the other side, to the other market price situation, and we focus on the case with the highest, with the highest cost of seed, what we can see is the complete opposite. When we are increasing our seed in our seed population, this line is clearly decreasing. So basically what we are seeing here is that the results on yield were the same. If you change your situation, if the cost of the seed changes and the market changes, it really, really changes, which is your ideal plant population. The yield didn't change. So saying that, we are going to keep going, and I'm going to go to the following statement that we are going to see. So it's supplemental nitrogen is essential to maximize yield in high yield environments. So this is just, let's put more nitrogen and we are going to have more yield. And this is fake. So there is a huge thing that makes soybeans incredible, and it's nitrogen fixation. So we know that soybeans have this relationship with this bacteria, the rhizobians, that it's just a relationship. So the plant gives to the bacteria energy that it comes from photosynthesis, from the sunlight, and the bacteria gives back to the plant nitrogen. So it's an association. So this actually, it's a great thing, but also it comes with a lot of risks. So which are the causes of bad nodulation that might cause that you might have different problems? You can have not enough oxygen in your soil, that it will be when your soil are saturated. You can have problems with the pH. You can have problems with the inoculant that you're using. You can have so many problems that might affect your nodulation. But one of these problems is high nitrogen content in your soil. And there is a reason because of this. And it's what we were talking before. It's this relationship that the plant has with the bacteria, because it's not free. This nitrogen is not free for the plant. The plant has to give the bacteria energy, carbohydrates, for the bacteria give the plant nitrogen. So it's not free. So if the plant senses that it doesn't need the bacteria to get the nitrogen it needs, it won't make the relationship. So it's, if you put nitrogen at the beginning, you might be harming this nodulation process because the plant won't make this association. And if that happens, you won't be able to have a good nodulation after. It's something that has to happen at the beginning because of a lot of reasons, but I can get sidetracked, so let's go, keep going. So, and I'm just explaining now the reasons behind these responses, but actually there is a lot of data that is behind this comment. So this is just interstate trial that it was done a few years ago. North Dakota participated with one side there in Fargo. It was work of Dr. Hans Kendall, that Dr. Hans Kendall participated. And I have to say, they tried everything. You cannot imagine the amount of treatments that this study has. So they tried different moments, different products, different rates, and what they found is nothing, that there is not a clear effect. So if we think about this, is this limited nitrogen response, it actually suggests that it's having a good economical return, it's not likely. So that's not something recommended. And if I didn't convince you yet, I have one more slide about this topic, and it's the cost in terms of nitrogen that soybean have. So if you have a 20 bushels per acre soybeans, you are taking from the ground, or from the air in this case, 100 pounds of nitrogen. So in a normal situation, then this nitrogen fixation, it will provide to the plant around 50 to 60% of the nitrogen that the plant needs. And the other 50 or 40%, it actually comes from the ground, from the nitrogen mineralization. So considering this, if we wouldn't have nodulation, can you imagine having to fertilize with 100 pounds of urea each season your soybeans, and how this will repercute in your returns? So we keep going, and I cannot believe that we are like half of the presentation, and I'm just seeing the cotyledon. But okay, as we were saying, something that's really important is to identify these grain stages. And this is something that people might confuse, is that when in soybeans, when we're talking that leaf is completely expanded, is when the one that is above it, the leaflet borders are not touching. So it's kind of a, I know, it's kind of a hard concept. So we say that here the cotyledons are fully expanded because the unipolar border of the leaves are not touching. So just then it's in BC. So let's see which is the comment that we have here. So visual stand assessment at BE often underestimates the total number of plants that will emerge. And this is true. So this is true. And why is that? Because all the things that we have been talking before, that this plasticity that the plant has. So if we're thinking on corn, and I like to make this comparison, if you have, we have two types of, sorry, if you have two types of variability that you can have. You can have a spatial variability when the plants are too close, or you can have temporal variability. So if you have this in corn, you will be really affected because one plant dominates the other. In the other case, soybeans, we have this amount of plasticity that is amazing. So if we keep going to the growth stages, and I have to hurry, when we talk about the vegetative growth, is generating all this biomass, generating all this leaf area, and this mostly goes from this BC to R5.5. This really varies depending if your soybeans are determinate or indeterminate. I'm not going to be talking about that. So Small plants with little leaf area do not intercept very much sunlight, and that might be a problem. And you might have these situations in early plantings. So early plantings might be a positive thing because you have more time your soybeans in the ground accumulating radiation, but at the same time, you have to consider if the temperature allows it, because it will affect the growth. So the next statement that I'm going to say is leaf area needs to develop rapidly from the beginning, and the leaf area from the plants needs to stay healthy for yields to be high. And this is actually fake. And I took the idea of bringing this figure here that it might take just 1 second to understand. So in the x-axis here, we have the crop cycle. And in the y-axis there, we have yield expressed as a percentage. So it's the yield expressed as the percentage of a treatment that had no stress at all. And what we are seeing here is that for different crops, and I'm going to just highlight soybeans for now. And what we're seeing here is that, okay, what happens if we have a stress? If we have a stress at this moment? What happens if we have stress only at this moment? What happens if we have stress at this moment? This arrow here represents flowering, and this arrow here represents the harvest of the crop. So if we have, what happens if we have a stress in different moments of the crop? So if you see here maize, you might relate it more easily. So if you have a stress in flowering, you have a huge drop in your yields. So let's focus now on soybeans. That's where we are talking today. So if you have a big stress at the beginning of your crop cycle, you can see that the line actually doesn't drop. So you're having close to your 100% of yield. So this means that actually if you have some kind of stress at the beginning of your season, but then it recovers, your yields are going to stay the same. You're not going to have this big drop in yields. But if we move through the crop cycle, what we are seeing here is that we do have a critical period for our soybeans, but it's towards the seed set. So when we are setting seeds. There is another way to see this, that it might be a tiny bit easier, and it's different going in different moments of the crop and defoliating. So if we go in R1, that is when you see one flower in any part of the main stem, and you take out 75% of your whole leaf area, you take almost all the leaves of your plant, you're going to have a drop of yield of only 10%. Only 10%. But if we go in R5, what we're going to see is that we are going to lose 40% of our yield. It's huge, the difference in this crop. So again, when we're talking about R1 and we're talking about flowering, there is a lot of changes in the physiology of these plants that are happening at this moment. In this moment is when the plants start to grow. They start to rapidly develop all the leaf area. You're going to see that they start accumulating a lot of biomass, and they start accumulating, taking a lot of the nutrients, that the final plant will take. So let's go to another of these statements, and it says soybean naturally aborts 20 to 80% of its flowers. And this is true. This is something that is true. So actually, soybean plants produce much more flowers than it actually needs. So if you see that you have problems with the number of flowers that you have, you shouldn't be concerned at this point. So soybeans are amazingly resilient to stress at the flowering time. And it's related to how the plant develops and how long the soybean plant keeps producing new flowers. So it gives a lot of flexibility on that side. So then we can talk about R4 and R5. that basically what we are doing in these growing stages, or plants is doing actually, is we are making our pots. And we are starting to make our seeds. So the seed starts to grow within the cavity of the pots. And then again, we have to consider which are the main drivers of our yield. So we have, usually this yield can be divided in seed yield and seed size. Seed number and seed size. Actually, the seed number is the one that drives more the changes in the yield. So anything that will affect the final number of seed that you have in your field, it will repercute in your final yield. So saying this, the soybean plant needs to retain most of its pods to maximize yield. So actually, this is not true. You have some pods that will naturally be aborted, but what we should really consider at this point is when we start in R5 or R5.5, this is the really critical moment for that. We should try to have all the resources available for our soybeans. I just said. So going on, I have 10 minutes more. Going on with this, R5 is that we are filling our seeds are filling the cavity of the pot. This is the moment that we have to protect and maintain the leaf area. So if you have any kind of disease or any kind of pest that might be affecting our leaf area, this is the moment that we have to protect it. It has to be as healthy as possible. And then here we might think, okay, maybe putting some foliar fertilizers will help because we need to protect it in this time. And then this is false. And there's this really nice study that was again done in the whole United States. And they tried so many products. And this is the results of North Dakota. And I think you can tell me that compared to the check that first got, there is no effect. You can put whatever you want and there's no effect. And if you see the whole report, they have one of these tables per state, and you have the same image. We did not find any effect on foliar fertilization in soybeans for the whole United States. Moving on, when we are in R6, that means that our seeds already fill the whole cavity of our pods, and there is some interesting things that they are actually happening during this moment, and it's related to the nodules. It's interesting to see what is happening above ground, but it's also really interesting to see what is happening below ground. So up to now, the plants really wanted to have nitrogen. It really was looking forward to take this relationship, but right now, maybe having more leaves and demanding more nitrogen is not the priority. And what it's actually the plant is focused on is in filling the grains. So it starts to drop the nutrients that is given to the nodules, and the relationship with the bacteria is actually finished by this moment. So this is a picture of a healthy nodule, but what actually is happening when we explore the nitrogen fixation is that around layer 6 already we start to drop this. And it's also related to this kind of relationship. So going now towards the end of the growing cycle, there is no many things that you can do at R7 or R8. That is when the pods start to change color. There is no many management decisions left to do. Something that you have to really take into account is that you shouldn't harvest below 13%. You should try to have that threshold. So when the seed is actually just maturing, that is the concept that it's not going to accumulate any more biomass, the humidity of that seed is 60%. and then it starts to drop at 3% per day. So basically you need, since maturity, you need around 15 days to have this perfect 13 moisture level. This really changes actually with the weather. So if you have different humidity on or different wind speed, and there's a lot of other factors, or the temperature, this 3% could even be higher. And compared to other crops, this is really fast. 3% is incredibly fast. So if we compare with corn, for example, corn rise 1% per day. So, and I kind of like to put numbers to things. So if you wait 1 or 2 extra days, that means that 13% will drop to 8 or 10%. And that's money. That's money, because that's weight of the soybean yield that you are not attaining. You are not selling. You're not selling water, but you're not selling it at the end. So this 8 to 10%, it actually, for a yield of 14 bushels per acre, this actually represents 1.4 or 2.3 bushels per acre that you are not selling. And it's just water. It's just timing, and it's just harvesting. So this is all the production tips I have for you today. And if you want to take out your cell phone, or if you have the handout, also you have all this QR there, or also if you want to send me an email and request any of this information, I will be happy to share it with you. Most of this information was done based on, again, this publication here. And there is a lot of NDSU and interstate other publications that I included. If you want anything, please just let me know. I will gladly share it with you. Also, I have a personal request today. I'm part of a multi-state project that is trying to grasp a little bit, which is the idea of digital ag that the farmers have, or the agronomists have. So if you have 10 minutes of your time, and you have this QR also in the handout that I shared, if you have 10 minutes and answer this, it will be really helpful, and I will really appreciate it. So I think I have time for questions.
Yes, you have 3 minutes.
I have 3 minutes. He writes first, sorry.
Starter fertilizer, phosphorus, sulfur. What do you know about that?
So can you say the first one?
Sulfur.
Sulfur.
Or
potassium. Okay.
Phosphorus. Yeah,
So something that I will always recommend, especially with those, is that you have to know your field. So potassium deficiencies, it's something real. We have a lot of potassium here in the east and central part of the North Dakota, but we have been depleting this. And this year we have the reports of a couple of farmers that they were seeing some chlorosis that they were not familiar. It was not IDC, and it was actually potassium deficiency. So you don't have to fertilize every time, but you have to check your soils to see if you have that minimum requirement. If you don't have it, you have to fertilize. So it's all about testing your soil and knowing your field, maintaining the health of your soil. It's about that. And that's with potassium. With sulfur, I'm not familiar with any trial that showed positive answers here. Potassium, yes, these conditions have been reported here in North Dakota. Yes, please.
What about inoculation and the bacteria in the soils? We're told we have to inoculate all the time, but do we really have to? And does the bacteria survive the cold temperatures?
I love your question. Thank you for making that. Yes, if you have a history of soybeans in your field, probably you have already the bacteria in your field. There is a few caveats from that. First, the inoculation, it depends on a lot of things. So it really depends on the weather conditions and the soil texture. If you don't have the ideal conditions for this, you might have not an efficient nodulation. If you inoculate every year, you are more it's more probable that you are going to have a good inoculation if you inoculate with a good product. Saying that, if you have a history of like at least more than 2 years of soybeans, in like the previous 2 years you had soybeans, probably you don't need to inoculate. So there is this publication from Dr. Franzen that it's available in NDSU, and he calculated that if you have a history of soybeans in your field, the return for doing inoculation is 2%. And sometimes it's 2% depending on the market. It won't actually cover the inoculation. So it depends on your field, sadly, because there is a lot of things involved like texture and there is other thing. I think I don't have much time, but I can talk about inoculation a lot. But if you were in Iowa, or I'm from Argentina, we inoculate every year because we want the best and the most efficient bacteria inoculating our soybean plants. And we see a return of investment. Here in North Dakota, we don't have a soybean that is so tailored to our conditions. So the wild type that it comes from the inoculation of previous years is good enough. And probably it's also depending on the potential. So probably it won't make you jump another step inoculation. But in other places that they are like really going in detail with management, yes, then it makes a difference.